for a little bit more. I will start my sermon soon. I just need to take a few selfies so that I can post them on my Facebook account later today. You see, I have a number of former friends who are Facebook friends who were part of my former congregations. And I just want to remind them that I am still preaching. And I hope that they will comment back what a wonderful pastor I am. Now, for those of you who know me well, you know that I am kidding. I am definitely not accustomed to taking selfies, and I rarely post pictures of myself on Facebook. The truth is, the self-promotion that is so commonplace today is so very different from how I was raised. I was constantly reminded that humility was a virtue. I was taught never to toot my own horn. And if I started thinking a little bit too highly of myself, I had two older brothers who definitely knew how to put me in my place. My, how things have changed. We now live in a world where self-promotion is not only acceptable, it is expected. And those who fail to do so are somehow missing out. Just ask Ryan McKenna. 1 week ago, he was an unknown teenager. But since last Sunday, he has made appearances on Good Morning America and The Today Show. What gave Ryan this sudden brush with fame? Quite simply, he took a selfie. It just happened to be during the Super Bowl halftime show, and the person who was with him just happened to be Justin Timberlake. And since the advent of social media, we all have the ability to do our own self-promotion. Thanks to outlets such as Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, we can post pictures of our most recent vacation. We can upload a video from a special event. We can send out a tweet letting others know what's on our mind. And apparently, the more likes or retweets we get, the more popular we are, and the better we can think about ourselves. At least, that's what some people think. The Apostle Paul lived nearly 2,000 years before the beginning of social media. And while I can't say for certain that he wouldn't have had an account with Facebook or Twitter, I can say for certain that he would not have used it for self-promotion. One strong hint comes from our second lesson for today, where Paul writes, "For we do not proclaim ourselves." And elsewhere he writes, "Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit." And while these words may sound countercultural in our day, the truth is, these words would have been quite radical in Paul's day as well. Even without the benefit of social media, some still found ways to promote themselves. Some still sought ways to pursue their own selfish ambitions. And as we learn from reading all of 2 Corinthians. Some who did so were within the Christian community. But for Paul, that type of behavior was unacceptable for followers of Jesus Christ. We do not promote ourselves. Hey everyone, I am the best Lutheran pastor. At least in Morganton, Georgia. We do not toot our own horn. Too bad all pastors aren't as brilliant and eloquent as I am. And we do not attempt to draw attention to ourselves. Look at me if you want to know how a Christian ought to live. Simply put, Paul reminds us that Christians have a different way of doing things, because Christians have a different focal point. As I continue on in 2 Corinthians 4 verse 5, Paul adds, "For we do not proclaim ourselves, we proclaim Jesus Christ as Lord." And again, elsewhere he reiterates that point. "Let the one who boasts, boast in the Lord." Simply put, we are not in the self-promotion business. We are in the Jesus promotion business. And the reason is quite obvious. Telling others how great we are will not change their lives. But telling others how great Jesus is can change their lives. And so we proclaim Jesus Christ, the one and only Son of God, the one who has shown us how to live life abundantly, the one whose death has freed us from our bondage to sin, the one whose resurrection has provided for us the promise of life eternal, and the one whose Spirit resides within us, filling us with his peace and his love. Yes, we proclaim Jesus Christ. Yes, we boast in the Lord. And frankly, when we have that message to proclaim, we would be foolish to proclaim any other message. And while the content of our message is clear, Jesus Christ, this is not to suggest that we are unimportant in the process. In fact, in God's plan, we are indispensable. In the final verse of today's second lesson, Paul comments, "But we have this treasure in clay jars." There are two important points Paul is making here. First, Paul reminds us that we are like clay jars. In the ancient world, these types of pots were typically used for storing things, water or wine or olive oil. But they were also used for cooking and for eating and drinking. But most of all, they were quite common. These clay pots were cheap, and they were breakable, and consequently they were easily discarded and easily replaced. When trying to think of a modern day analogy, one commentator suggested that these jars were like fast food containers. us on the surface, being compared to a clay jar seems not like much of a compliment. Rather, it seems somewhat demeaning. But Paul reminds us that within these jars of clay is a treasure. In fact, that was true in ancient times. In addition to storing more mundane, everyday things, they were sometimes used to store valuables, gold, silver, or jewelry. And interestingly, the Dead Sea Scrolls were found in these clay pots. And so Paul reminds us, within each one of us, within our jar of clay, is a priceless treasure. Jesus Christ himself. And the good news of Jesus, which we are meant to share with others. We have a message of hope for those who are despairing. We have a message of acceptance for those who have only felt rejection. We have a message of forgiveness for those who are riddled by guilt. We have a message of a God who loves us so much that he came to live among us and ultimately to die for us. That is what is contained within each and every one of us. Not because we are so special, but because God is so great. As Paul writes, we have this treasure in clay jars so that it may be made clear that this extraordinary power belongs to God and does not come from us. In a world where the word selfie has joined the lexicon and was in fact declared the 2013 Word of the Year by the Oxford English Dictionary, where social media is such a huge cultural influence, we certainly live in a golden age of self-promotion. But may we always remember that as Christians, we have something other than self to proclaim. We have someone far more important to promote. His name is Jesus Christ. And he has more than 2 billion followers. But he is looking to each one of us, his jars of clay, to help him to increase his numbers. Amen. Amen. I invite you to stand as you are able. We join together in our hymn of the day. It is hymn number 661.